Imagine an aircraft that literally every major airline in the world was begging to buy. A plane so perfectly designed that it could revolutionize how we fly, cutting ticket prices, unlocking hundreds of new direct routes, and completely changing the economics of the airline industry. It was the absolute perfect machine. Sounds amazing, right? Well, there's just one massive problem. It doesn't exist. And honestly, it probably never will. Today we are talking about the ultimate ghost of the aviation industry, a plane that has been obsessed over boardrooms and aviation forums for nearly a decade. The Boeing 797. Was it really the perfect aircraft? And if it was so perfect, why can't you buy a ticket on one today? Before we dive into the secret engineering, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It takes just a second, but it really helps push these aviation deep dives out to more people. Alright, let's get into it. To understand why the 797 was considered perfect, we first have to understand the massive headache that airlines have been dealing with for the last 15 years. In the aviation world, there is a legendary dead zone called the middle of the market, or the MOM. For decades, this gap was filled by two legendary Boeing aircraft, the 757 and the 767. The 757 was this incredibly overpowered, long, single-aisle rocket ship that could take off from short runways and cross the Atlantic. The 767 was a small, twin-aisle widebody that dominated transcontinental and medium-aisle international flights. But here's the issue. Those planes were designed in the late 70s and 80s. They are aging, they are gas guzzlers by modern standards, and airlines have been retiring them. So airlines desperately needed a replacement. They needed a plane that was bigger and has longer legs than a standard narrow body like a 737 or an A320, but wasn't a massive, heavy and expensive to operate as a widebody like a 787 Dreamliner or an A350. They needed a Goldilocks plane. Not too big, not too small, just right. Enter the 797. Now, just to be precise with the facts here, Boeing never officially called it the 797. Inside the company, this was known as the NMA, the new Midsize Airplane. The proposed specs for the NMA were exactly what airlines were dreaming of. The NMA 6X, which would carry about 225 passengers and fly roughly 5,000 nautical miles, and the NMA-7X, a slightly larger version carrying 275 passengers with a range of 4,500 nautical miles. The economics were supposed to be mind-blowing. Boeing targeted a 40% lower trip cost compared to the older widebodies it was replacing, while generating 30% more revenue than existing narrow bodies. It was perfectly designed for long but thin routes. Think about flights from St. Louis to London, or Chicago to secondary cities in Europe, or pushing deep into South America from the US. Routes where you simply can't fill a 300-seat widebody, but you still need the range to cross an ocean. Over 50 airlines, huge players like Delta, United and Qantas, were practically throwing their wallets at Boeing, begging them to build this thing. Qantas even publicly stated they wanted to be their launch customer. But as Boeing dug into the actual engineering, the perfect plane started to reveal some nearly impossible design paradoxes. And this is where the story gets really interesting. Most people just assume the 797 would be a shrunken down 787 Dreamliner, a carbon fiber tube with some new engines. For example, as the 787-3. Have you ever heard of it? By the way, I've created a video about it and it will appear somewhere here. But that wasn't the case at all. Behind closed doors, Boeing realized that a standard widebody design wouldn't work for the economics they needed. Airlines insisted on the 797 being a twin-aisle aircraft. Why? Because twin aisles mean faster boarding and deplaning times. If you have 250 people cramming onto a single-aisle plane, the turnaround time at the gate is brutal. And airplanes only make money when they are in the air. A 2-3-2 seating layout with two aisles solves that. But there's a catch. Twin-aisle jets typically have massive circular fuselages, which creates a massive cargo holds underneath the passenger floor. Airlines aren't moving that much cargo. They are moving people. So huge circular fuselage just creates unnecessary weight and drag, killing the fuel efficiency. They decided to design an entirely new ovoid or elliptical fuselage. Imagine a shape that is wide at the top to accommodate the two aisles, and the passengers but narrow at the bottom, like a single-aisle jet, to reduce drag and minimize the empty cargo space. It looks brilliant on a blueprint, but in reality, physics hates an oval. When you pressurize an aircraft cabin at 35,000 feet, a perfect circle distributes the stress evenly. An oval creates massive stress concentrations at the curves. Building a pressurized ovoid fuselage, especially out of carbon fiber, is incredibly difficult and notoriously heavy, because you have to reinforce the structure so much to keep it from failing. And that leads us right into the great materials debate. Everyone thought the 787 would be entirely composite, like the 787. But to make this plane perfect, it had to be cheap. Airlines are notoriously frugal, and the market consensus was that to be competitive, Boeing needed to price the 797 somewhere between $65 million and $75 million per unit. To put that into perspective, a 787-8 has a list price of well over $100 million. Building composite barrel sections is exceptionally expensive. To save even more billions in research and development, the 797 was starting to look like a bit of a Frankenstein aircraft. Early renderings and insider leaks showed it would borrow heavily from Boeing's greatest hits. It was slated to feature the massive dreamable cabin windows of the 787, but the cockpit windscreen lineage was lifted straight from the old 757 and 767. The tail cone aerodynamics were derived from the 737 MAX, and the door arrangements mimicked the 767-200. It was a parts-bin plane wrapped in a highly experimental oval fuselage. But even if Boeing figured out the shape and the materials, they ran headfirst into the wall they couldn't control: the engines. To make the crazy economics of the 797 work, Boeing needed a revolutionary engine. They needed something in the 45 to 50,000 pounds of thrust class that was 20 to 30% more fuel efficient than current technology. And the brutal truth, nobody had one. Rolls-Royce, General Electric and Pratt & Whitney simply didn't have an engine ready for Boeing's original target launch date of the 2025. Rolls-Royce even formally pulled out the competition for the NMA in 2019, stating their ultra-fun technology just wouldn't be mature enough in time. So, you have incredibly complex, potentially expensive fuselage, missing the engines required to make it fly efficiently, but even then, they might have spent the billions required to make it happen. But then, 2019 happened. The 737 MAX crisis fundamentally alerted the trajectory of the Boeing company. Following the tragic crashes and the subsequent grounding of the entire MAX fleet, Boeing had to pivot absolutely every ounce of its engineering talent, its financial resources, and its regulatory focus toward fixing and recertifying the 737 MAX. The company was bleeding billions of dollars. They simply did not have the capital or the bandwidth to launch a brand new clean sheet aircraft program that would cost upwards of $15 to $25 billion to develop. In January 2020, then CEO Dave Calhoun officially drove the final nail into the coffin. He publicly paused the NMA project, stating that the competitive landscape had changed and Boeing needed to start with a clean sheet of paper. When they were ready, the 797, as we knew it, was that. And while Boeing was fighting fires and posing their perfect plane, Airbus swooped in and practically stole the entire market. Airbus looked at the middle of the market gap and decided not to spend $20 billion inventing a new plane. Instead, they took their existing, highly successful A320 platform and pushed it to its absolute physical limits. The result was the A321 XLR. The XLR is a single-aisle plane. It doesn't have the fast boarding or the spacious comfort of the twin-aisle 797 concept. But you know what it does have? It has a range of 4,700 nautical miles. It carries up to 244 passengers. And most importantly, it actually exists. Airlines that grew tired of waiting for Boeing's perfect paper plane, including massively loyal Boeing customers like United and American Airlines, bought the A321 XLR by the hundreds. It's entering service right now, in the mid-2020s, exactly when the 797 was supposed to dominate. Airbus won the middle of the market without even building a new airplane. So what happens now? Will we ever see a Boeing 797? The short answer is no, not anytime soon, and certainly not as a twin-aisle ovoid midsize plane we originally pictured. Fact-checking current statements from Boeing leadership reveals a harsh truth. Boeing will not launch a new clean-sheet aircraft until next-generation propulsion technology, like the open-fan engines, matures. And when the 2030s roll around, the threat isn't just Airbus anymore. A company called JetZero, heavily backed by the US Air Force, is currently building a blended wing-body demonstrator jet. They are targeting a 250 passenger capacity with a 5,000 nautical mile range. Those are the exact specs of the 797. But because of the radical blended wing design, they are promising up to a 50% reduction in fuel burn. By the time Boeing is ready to build their next plane, the entire concept of what a perfect aircraft looks like might have completely changed. The Boeing 797 was an aerodynamic and economic tightrope walk. It was an ambitious, beautiful concept designed for a specific moment in time. But bad timing, corporate crisis and lack of ready engine technology and the brutal reality of physics kept the perfect aircraft locked in the hangar forever. What do you guys think? Should the Boeing have risked it all and built the 797 anyway? Or did Airbus just play the game better with the A321 XLR? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the 797, please make sure to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more aviation content. It means a lot and helps me keep making these videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.